This is an historic day, and it's difficult to disagree. When you look at the text of the treaty, what becomes very clear is that Australia and PNG have made serious strategic commitments to one another. Now, this has been reported on before, but of course it's one thing to get an early draft, it's another thing to get the document in black and white. And that treaty has now been released, as promised, by the Australian government. It's up on DFAT's website, allowing everyone to go through it line by line. The language around those strategic commitments is pretty significant. Both sides say that an armed attack on the other nation would represent a threat not just to the security of both nations but also to the broader Pacific, and they promise to act together to meet the common danger. Now, of course, there is the usual rider that it would have to be in line with constitutional processes in both countries. So as you'd expect, there are a few caveats around that, but this is language not radically dissimilar to what we see in other agreements that Australia struck before, including its treaty with the United States. And it makes it very clear that both countries are telling each other not only are they the number one security partner of choice, but also they would give serious consideration to a joint response should the other face an attack. So it's a big step for both countries. It's perhaps a particularly big step for PNG, which for years has talked about friends to all, enemies to none. James Marape is keen to say today that he's certainly not trying to make enemies out of anyone, be that China or anyone else. But when it comes to security, they've moved away from non-alignment. They're now saying very clearly Australia is at the top of that tree.
I know you've been able to go through the treaty dialogue now. What are some of the main provisions that you've noticed in there?
Look, beyond that language around the mutual defence language, I think it's worth noting just how many serious commitments have been made by both sides, particularly by Australia, to not only increase interoperability, but also work towards essentially Australia providing the defence material, the equipment, the firepower that PNG needs to become a more formidable defence force. And for its part, of course, PNG is making serious commitments to Australia, not just strategically, but also in the defence recruitment space. So James Marape and Anthony Albanese have said today that up to 10,000 PNG citizens will join the ADF over coming years or decades. That's a big number. It's not clear whether Australia will be able to recruit that many, but nonetheless, that's a serious potential contribution, at the very least, from PNG that will help Australia deal with one of its main security challenges, which is simply the problem around recruitment, finding the able-bodied men and women needed to provide the defence that the nation needs in increasingly perilous times.
Yeah, could it fill some of those gaps? Stephen, sorry to interrupt you. Could it fill some of those gaps? What will it mean for Australia's recruitment efforts?
Yeah, well, look, it absolutely could fill some of those gaps. I mean, a lot of this will depend on exactly what structures are put around this, how quickly Australia can move, what eligibility requirements are put in place, and exactly, what level will have to be met. I don't think anyone is saying that we're going to see thousands of PNG citizens joining the ADF, in the next couple of years. I think this will likely take time to set up that pipeline, but it does provide a useful new avenue for Australia to find the people that it needs to defend the nation. They have managed to pick up recruitment rates recently, but it's off a pretty low base. It's still not nearly where the government wants it to be. So this could be a really important contribution towards that effort.
China's interest in this part of the world is well tabled and well known to both the Australian and Papua New Guinea leaders. What specifically did James Marape have to say about the likely response by China and other nations to the signing of this historic treaty?
Yeah, that's right. China's made it clear it doesn't love this pact. It's been careful in its criticism. It hasn't directly taken aim at either PNG or Australia, and it said that PNG has every right to sign agreements like this, but it's also said that PNG shouldn't do anything to compromise its independence and that nothing should be done to lock out third parties. In this case, of course, the third party, Catherine, is, of course, China, which Australia wants to make sure can't get any sort of security foothold in Papua New Guinea. James Marape, though, unsurprisingly, interestingly, is very keen to say, and was very keen at the press conference today, to emphasise that he doesn't want to make an enemy out of anyone, let alone China. He still sees Beijing as a very clear and very important economic partner. His argument is that what this document does is it just formalises Australia's position as the #1 security partner. He would like Beijing to basically stick to the economic space. Whether Beijing's willing to do that or not, or would like to change that, particularly after Mr Marape eventually leaves office, is another question. But let's take a listen to what he had to say on this front, speaking to journalists in Canberra not that long ago.
This is not a treaty that sets up enemies, but consolidates friendships. And China we've been transparent. We have told them that Australia has become our security partner of choice, and they understand our alliances here. They have relationship elsewhere, including our own relationships. Other aspects of our relations has never been compromised. Australia has been always a security partner of choice, just consolidating that space with no intent of creating enemies elsewhere.
Unsurprisingly, though, it's not just China that may at least have queries about this. Indonesia has already made a few pointed inquiries over the last few weeks of the Australian and the PNG side about exactly how this will play out. That doesn't mean that Indonesia is opposed to this. It just wants to get absolute clarity about how this will operate. Interestingly, James Marape said again today that his Defence Minister, Billy Joseph, will basically take a bit of a tour around the region, talking to countries like Indonesia, like China, about exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and also presumably trying to reassure them that this isn't aimed at any third parties. Of course, whether China takes that message on board, whether it believes it, is a separate question. But clearly, James Marape is aware that there's some sensitive terrain being traversed here, and he wants to make sure that by forming this ever closer friendship with Australia, he's not, by accident, putting other important partners offside at the same time.